Hello, welcome to another online lecture in computer architecture. In this lecture series, we have been looking at various concepts that are fundamental to what makes a computer. And in that series, in the previous week, we looked at parallel computing and parallel processing and how a combination of a number of processes in the form of symmetric multiprocessors or clusters can be used to process multiple instructions in parallel. So in continuing from that, this week we are going to be looking at multi-core computers. If we briefly go back to what we discussed in the previous week when we were looking at parallel computers, we can identify parallel computers are computing devices or combination of computing devices together that can process a large number of instructions, and they have a large number of processing elements as part of them. So they can improve the overall execution of total number of execution of instructions can be improved by making them run in parallel. So the problem of parallel computing has been a long running thing, and we have a number of solutions, and the few that we discussed in the previous lesson are some of those. So today we are going to continue from them and sort of identify what are the few other ways this parallel computing can be happening in certain computing environments. So when we think about computers in general, when we think about processors in general, we have seen a number of improvements and changes over the last number of years, last many years. So one is the speeds of these computers have increased, and the way that they are organized, the way that they are constructed, that has also changed over the years. And we have come to have a number of different ways that we build parallelism within microprocessors as well. So we have pipelining, superscalars, and or simultaneous multithreading. Again, some of these we have discussed previously. But a thing to remember here is we have a problem that is there in with microprocessors and sort of the advancement of microprocessors is the further we come along, we have the problem of diminishing returns. So the complexity that we need to put in to make certain improvements to whatever that is already there, that complexity and that investment that is needed to do that may not give us the returns or may not give us the same level of advantages by improving the same microprocessor. So just by shoving in more transistors and more logics into a single microprocessor is not going to give us the same level of return. So just by increasing it by 100%, we may not be able to get the performance advantages as 100%. So that may change depending on how those implementations can be. So that is one of the things that we will be focusing on when we are thinking about these multi-core processors. So when we were looking at scalar and superscalar architecture, the main thing that we sort of identified is how we were trying to fit more and more components, more and more logic components and so on within the same CPU. And even with these sort of architectures, we were still able to have some level of parallelism in the form of instruction level parallelism, simultaneous multi-threading where we had parallelism at the thread level and so on. So these things have already existed previously as well. But when we think about instruction level parallelism, for example, with instruction level parallelism, the challenge is we will be having much more deeper processor pipeline. So because everything is still happening within the same processor, whatever the parallelism that we build at thread level, at instruction level, it is still going to have everything going through the same processor, and that can have certain disadvantages. And one of the places where we found these problems is when we were thinking about cache memory. Because when the speed of the processors increased, we had to bring in more and more faster cache memories to enable the process to access whatever the instruction related information and the data and instruction and so on much faster from these cache memories. But the problem is we may not be able to bring more and more cache memories when we are building these things into a single processor architecture. And another problem that came about was with the increase of these more and more complex structures, we also had more power consumption and so on. So there was a lot of these things were increasing. They were able to do this. These processors were able to function with improved or like higher performance than the previous ones, but they had some disadvantages as these. And according to Moore's law, where these processors and the transistor density is going to increase, that also kept on going. So we kept on getting more and more capable, more and more transistor heavy, transistor dense processors, which were able to do a lot of things, but we will not be able to make them as efficient as we could be, because like as further they increased, the efficiency became less and less compared to sort of the previous version. So a solution to this problem is what we call as multi-core processors or chip multiprocessors. So where we are having multiple cores of processors in the same chip. So that is basically what we mean by a multi-core processor. So if we look at this various sort of chip organization structures that we can have, so say in superscalar, what we had was we had a shared L2 cache, and then we had instructions and executions happening. There was some level of parallelism happening, but we were still running them through same logic. Then with simultaneous multi-threading, again now we sort of split that again into a set of a number of program counters and a number of registers, and now these each individual threads can be running in parallel, but we still have the same processor core running and the instructions. So that is still there, but we were up to that point we were adding some level of parallelism in these architectures, in these structures. But whereas in multi-core, what we have is we would have a shared L2 cache or L3 cache depending on how it is. Then we would have separate level 1 data and instruction caches. Then each core will have its own CPU. So each core is a CPU that can run its instructions on its own. So we can have either a superscalar or a SMT CPU here. So this can be one single CPU. Then all of those can be connected together through a shared cache, for example, and everything else will be a multiple of the same thing. So that is how a multi-core processor will be normally organized. So when we think about the parallel computers of today, so in sort of previously like around 2000s and before, parallel computers were mainly about the server based computers or supercomputers and so on. But whereas since 2000 and so, the architectures of processors and things have improved. Architectures of processors and the processor cores and processors with multiple cores have been implemented. So now what we have is this multi-core chip multiprocessors being commonplace in most computers. So be it laptops or desktops or even servers, or most of them use multi-core processors. So then what that means is most of the computers that we have these days can be categorized as parallel computers. So it used to be that parallel computers were only used as server or sort of supercomputer applications, but these days even your laptop or a desktop could be a parallel computer because it has this multi-core processor architecture. So what is the main difference that we would have in multi-core processors? So when we contrast that with sort of traditional microprocessors, or even like traditional microprocessors like in where we can do some level of parallelism, there what we would do is we would have set of processors, then we would need to have some level of interconnect. That is where we would use the multi-process architecture, like the simultaneous multiprocessor and so on, or even like clusters, for example. We could have a number of individual processors, but then they are interconnected externally through some interconnect networks like buses and so on, maybe even network connected computers. Whereas multi-cores, on the other hand, what we have is even that interconnection is built into the chip. So we have the processor cores and they are level 1 caches, they are level 2 caches, but also the networking or interconnect part is now built into the processor core itself. So the interconnect part is also built into the processor core. So instead of having multiple processors separately and then building interconnections externally, as in multiprocessor systems, in multi-core systems, even the interconnections between these individual processors or processor cores will be within the same chip itself. So one of the things that is necessary for these to be utilized is whatever the software systems, whatever the operating systems need to support this. So because this depends on how they utilize these features of these hardware parallelisms, but generally these type of data parallel applications such as rendering or like large scale data parallel applications can, with sort of high levels of threading, can utilize this type of multi-core processors. So what we see with this this level of increasing sort of processor architectures and so on is we also see the increase of say the density, processor density and so on are increasing, but also we would see that the power requirements are also increasing, because like the more and more components that we put into a chip, the more and more transistors and so on we put into a chip, more and more logic structures that we put into a chip, the complexity increases, but that also means the power requirements that would be there, they would also increase. But one of the things to remember here is, say for example, if we increase or if we have a processor that has a 1 billion transistors for logic and they are put in a 300 millimeter die with 100 MB cache memory and so on. So we are increasing all these things into a single processor. But there's a rule called Pollack's rule. What that says is the performance increase will not be like 100% performance increase. Say if we double the number of transistors in a chip, the performance will only increase by 40%. So that is why instead of say for example, if we have a single processor and if we increase the size of it by as a single processor and if we increase its size by 4 times, then what we may end up having is, so we have a single processor increase its size by 4 times, and comparatively what we can also do is we can have the size increase by multiplying the number of processor cores. By multiplying the number of process cores, we will not get caught with this problem, that problem of like lessening of performance increase, because we are just duplicating the same processor performance across the 4 processors that we have. Whereas if we just increase the size of a single processor, we will not be able to have the same level of increase. So that is also one of the reasons why we prefer to use multi-core processors. So one of the things that we can think about when we are thinking about these increasing complexities and so on, we are thinking about 2 things. One is, what is the total number of transistors that can be available in a chip, and what is the total number of transistors that are in a chip that are doing logic functions, because both of these are important factors, because we want to increase, like the logic functions are the ones that are actually going to do the computation. So the more and more logic transistors can be put in there, can do more. So then by increasing the number of cores that we have within a processor, if we increase the number of cores that are inside a processor by duplicating that, within the whole chip, the total number of transistors that can do logic operations will also increase. So that is also something that we will observe in sort of as time goes along with sort of newer and newer processors. That is also something we would observe. Another thing that we would observe is regarding the power consumption. So as we already know, like the power density, or the density means like how much power is needed for a particular area of a processor. Again, that would also increase as we have more and more denser processors. So when we bring in more and more transistors and so on close together and they are more densely packed, the power usage of those chips will also increase. Then another thing that we will use or we will do is how much of cache area we will utilize in a chip, because the problem that we will have is if we increase the speeds of these processors, if the speed of the processors are increasing, and then we are building more and more internal structures within the processors, so now they are able to do more faster. Then when we need to do things more and more faster, we also need to have more and more cache memory available. And with that, we will also be able to fit in more and more cache memory in that space as well. So we will be doing that there, so it can be utilized in that manner. With all of these increasing complexities and so on, having multi-core processors or even any type of parallelism that is there, the performance increase will largely also depend on the software that is being used. So even if we have a much highly optimized multi-core processor, it will still not be able to give the performance increase unless the software that is using that is making use of that capability. So unless the software can exploit these features of parallel processing by having multiple threads running in parallel, this computer or this processor will not be able to give the performance increase as it promises. So, and even within our whole code, even if there are certain parts of the code that is not well written, then it will also impact the overall outcomes that we may have. And also software will also impact on how inter-process communication or how threads are communicating among themselves, how the work is distributed among the available cores, for example. So some of these things have to be done by the operating systems, and some of these things have to be done by the application software that is running on the operating system, and the combination of those two software together will be able to effectively utilize multi-core processors. So unless we have suitably supporting operating systems and applications, we will not be able to get any performance advantages through multi-core processors. So some of the applications that can utilize multi-core processors and have sort of effective advantages are things like databases. For example, a database will normally be accessed by multiple users at the same time. So then each of those accesses are potentially multi-threadable. So you can have each request running on different threads and so on. So databases can actually utilize the advantages of multi-core processors. Then, for example, web servers or any type of other servers that are also handling like independent transactions. So for example, a web server may be receiving web requests from or like requests for web pages from a number of users at the same time. So again, if we can take all these different requests from different users and put them on a thread and run it as a thread, then again we can utilize these advantages of a multi-core processor. Then there could be a number of other applications that are specifically designed to be multi-threaded applications. So these are the ones that we would call as multi-threaded native applications. So these applications natively build multi-threading as part of them. Then we could also have certain applications that can be categorized as multi-process applications. So what we would have is certain applications may run individual parts of the application as separate processes. You may have observed this in certain even sort of day-to-day applications like web browsers. There are a number of web browsers. What they do is they run individual tabs of the browsers and individual windows of the browsers as separate processes. So now what they have done is effectively, instead of having the whole web browser as a single process and the processing to be done in that manner, they have separated all of those windows and tabs into individual threads or individual processes, and all of them can be executed separately. Then, for example, a number of Java applications, and depending on how they are implemented, especially the Java virtual machines, they implement multi-threading. And then there are certain other applications that, for example, may be running multiple instances. So we can have some applications that inherently build multi-threading, for example. Then we can have some applications that can run multiple processes in parallel. So but they are running something together. So a web browser may be combined together, gives the user experience as a single application, but underlyingly it is running multiple processes. Or sometimes we could also have multi-instance applications. Say, for example, if we are having a video software or like a rendering software or something that can encode or render type of things, and we can run multiple instances doing separately. So there's no connection between these processes or these instances of the processes. They're separate processes running together. So those type of applications may also give some advantages when we utilize multi-core processes. So these are some of the examples or some of the type of applications that will get advantages in multi-core processes. So for example, if you have a single threaded application that doesn't have a lot of computational needs to have multi-threading, may not utilize, or we will not see any performance increase in such an application even when we run it on a multi-core processor. So we need the applications to do certain things, them to be designed in a certain manner, and the underlying operating systems to operate in a certain manner for that advantages of multi-core processors to be exploited for the end user perspective. So when we think about multi-cores, again within multi-cores, there can be a number of ways these multiple cores can be organized. So we have multiple CPU cores, and most of the time we will have a level 1 cache attached to that, and then we'll have level 2 and main memory. So those components will be there in some order. But depending on the type of the processor, they may be organized in a particular manner. So for example, in this one, only level 1 cache is dedicated. So that means only level 1 cache is available per processor. So for each processor, there is a level 1 cache, whereas level 2 cache is now shared among all the processors. All the processor cores share the same level 2 cache. And then, for example, main memory and I/O are also shared across the processor. Then another way that we can have is we can have dedicated level 2 caches. So what we have here is, for each processor core, then what we have is there is a dedicated level 1 cache, and also there is a dedicated level 2 cache. Then the main memory and I/O are shared across them. And another way that we can have is we can have a level 2 cache shared cache, but here compared to this one, A and C, in C the shared L2 cache is inside the chip itself, whereas here it is external to the chip. So the level 2 cache is not part of the chip in A, whereas in C level 2 cache is shared but still built into the chip itself. So for example, Intel Core 2 Duo sort of architecture processors follow this model. Then another way we can have is, now we can have 3 layers of cache memory. So what we can have is, we can have a dedicated level 1 cache, a dedicated level 2 cache, and a shared level 3 cache. So the first 2 layers of cache are dedicated, and the third one is shared across. And then all of these can be built into the same chip. So previously there were like 2 levels of cache. Now we have added a third level of cache which is shared, and the first 2 levels of cache are dedicated. So if you remember from our memory hierarchy discussion, that we can have a number of levels of caches. So this is an example of that. So this is an example of this type of a structure is the Core i7, Intel Core i7 type processors. So when we think about having a shared L2 cache, so in some cases we were having dedicated level 2 caches, in some cases we were having shared level 2 caches. So now there are certain reasons why we may want to have a shared level 2 cache. So one of the advantages is what is called constructive interference. So because all these the way normally we would use cache memories is the CPU is requesting something to be accessed from the memory, and that is normally brought in there at the cache memory for use by the processor. So one of the scenarios that we discussed when we were discussing memories is we can have a situation where there is a cache miss. So that is, the information is not currently available in the cache, so it has to be fetched from the main memory. So with having a level 2 cache and level 1 cache and so on, we are having these at multiple levels. So we are, instead of having, say, from main memory to level 2 and level 1 and then into the processor. So what we can have with sort of this constructive interference is we can reduce the overall miss rate. So because this shared memory is accessed by multiple parts of the multiple cores, and multiple cores may be accessing some relevant information that is already available in the cache, and because it is shared, other part of the processors may also be using. Say for example, we have 2 cores. Let's assume there are 2 cores. There is a shared cache, and say if core 1 was accessing a part of the memory and that was loaded here already, and now the thread in core 2 also needs the same information, because it is a memory access. They can go, because if they belong to the same thread and they have there's no protection issues, they can go and access, because it is already brought into the level 2 cache, the shared cache. It can be directly accessed. So that is an advantage we can have. And then for example, if we have a dedicated level 2 cache, that information has to be duplicated in both of these. So this one is taking from there and this one is taking from there. Each of those level 2 caches will also have to have duplicates of those. So with this type of a shared cache, as with any sort of shared memory type of approach, here also we will be able to do what is called better sort of inter-process communication, because it is still a shared memory that we have. And we can also have, say, as with anything, we can improve the performance of this, or improve the capabilities of this by adding another layer of a cache as well. So we can make the level 2 cache as a dedicated cache, and then make the level 3 cache as the shared cache. So that is also possible. So that is what we did in a number of these architectures. In some of them we had shared level 2 caches, some we have dedicated, and then we also have a level 3 caches in some. Now let's look at some examples of core architectures or multi-core architectures. So 2 common processor examples that you may come across even in sort of personal computing environment is the Intel Core Duo architecture and the Intel i7 architecture. Whereas Intel Core Duo, the main difference is they both have number of cores. So inside the processor there are number of cores that is common across them. But the main difference is in Intel Core Duo, the inside cores are superscalar processors, whereas inside Core i7, the inside cores are SMT, or the simultaneous multi-threading processors. So the inside cores themselves can be different and create or give us few different overall multi-core architecture. So with Core i7, the advantages we have is because the SMT or the simultaneous multi-threading itself can have multiple threads running in parallel. So it can be a 4 multi-threaded processor, that a processor core. And then if we add 4 of those together, we can have what can be an effectively a 16 core processor. So the 4 cores are coming initially from SMT, and then we are duplicating that SMT into 4 duplications of 4 processors into the same chip. Now we have 16 cores. So we start with a larger chip that has 4 cores, and within each core, now each of those have, say that is an SMT which can have 4 threads. So this is also a way, so main difference between Core Duo and Core i7 architectures, one using superscalar and the other one using simultaneous multi-threading. So if we look at the Core Duo architecture, here we can see the individual cores, and for each core there are certain things that we have, say like a level 1 cache, the execution parts and so on, and they also have a dedicated thermal control, because power consumption and thermal sort of heat issues are an important thing of like this type of complex processor, so they are also dedicated. Then each of them also has a what is called an advanced programmable interrupt controller, which is again is dedicated to each core, so any sort of interrupt handling for each processor can be managed separately. Then things like power management and level 2 cache are shared across all the cores. So this is basically the basic structure of the Core Duo processors. Whereas with Core i7 processors, what we have is the processor core and level 1 cache and the level 2 cache, both of them dedicated here. So these are duplicated across the multiple cores. Then we have a shared level 3 cache, and then we also have additionally DDR3 memory controllers and quick path interconnection and so on. So in addition to having these multiple cores and connected through a shared cache, we also have additional capabilities in terms of faster memory access and high-speed communication and so on, built in using additional components. And lastly, another consideration that we may have in terms of thinking about this multi-core processors is, and for multi-core processors to scale up and take the full advantage of their processing capabilities, is what is the type of memory we have and how the memory is able to support that. So for example, when we scale up the number of cores, then each chip will also need to access a part of memory, because each chip will have need to access memory independently, because now each of those cores can execute things independently. So what we may need to do is we may have to increase the size of memory that is available, so it can feed the necessary information that is needed by individual cores. But one of the problems that we have, or one of the sort of challenges that we may face, is the speed or the increase in processor technology is normally much faster than the increase or improvements in the memory technology. So we need to find effective ways of improving that memory technology, or managing the lack of improvement in memory technology as the processor speeds increase, the number of processor cores increase, and so on. So this is also one of the reasons why we have sort of advanced multi-cache structures and so on, is to address the memory issues. And it is also commonplace that when we have larger and faster processors, it is needed, we need to have much higher capacity capable memories, so that they can cater to the needs of those processors and multi-cores in those processors. So that's all that we have to discuss today in terms of multi-cores, multi-core processors, or chip multi-cores. So what we have here in this is a way of doing parallel computing, parallel processing. But instead of running multiple processors in parallel, sort of connected externally, we have the interconnect happening inside a single chip, which is a multi-core processor chip, and each of the processor cores are maybe connected through the interconnection inside the chip with possibly shared cache memories, either level 2 or level 3 cache memories, and this can give us a much higher performing processor compared to just increasing the size of a single processor. Then other things that we discussed is these processors, to take advantage of these processors, we need to utilize, or the operating systems and the software need to utilize the exact capabilities. Otherwise, we will not be able to gain the same level of advantages as with single core processors. So the multiplication to be useful, we need to have suitable software application. So with that, we conclude the series of lectures that we will be covering as part of this course. Some of these concepts may be revisited in your operating system course, or you may have already covered those. And what we have left to do in the current course is we will go through some revision classes in the coming weeks, and we will possibly have some quizzes and assignments as well. And so those details will be made available through to you through the learning management system. And if you have any questions so far on this lesson or any other lesson, please contact me through your usual mediums. So other than that, that's all for today. Thank you for joining in this lesson. See you next time. Bye.